they're gonna fly. No stone unturned, the facts alive. Bigfoot story now defined. Footsteps here and shadows there. In the woods they do prepare. Concerts are like rain. Bigfoot secrets show today. Sunday night of fire to shine. Sunday night of sunshine. Swan sees it's time to shine. Sunday night of fire to shine. Sunday night of fire to shine. Squatter is all it's time to shine. Squatter is all it's time to shine.
Welcome to Squatch-D TV, where the truth is first before all else. Join your hosts, veteran investigator, TV personality, and author Steve Kulls, and from the Kentucky Bigfoot Research Project and the Kentucky Fried Fixes channel, Chris Bennett. Sit back and prepare to take yourself on a journey with the longest-running Bigfoot podcast, Squatch-D TV. Here are your hosts, Steve and Chris.
And good evening, cyberspace. Welcome to Squatch-D TV for today's date, September 13th, 2024. I'm your host, your guide, the Squatch Detective, Steve Kulls, along with my co-host. And I don't know how.
Why do I receive top billing tonight? I don't know.
Well, because I had to back out trying to stop that.
Well, this ain't gonna work, man. I
Hang
can't.
on, watch this.
Oh, that's
There
better.
we go.
That's better. That's good. Thank you, sir. Well, it's good, Steve. Good to see you, Steve, man.
And I see Alan's Grass is complaining about the music. Well, Grass, let me just say this. It doesn't matter what music I play. Somebody's going to bitch about it. So I'm going to put the music I like out there because somebody's always bitching about it.
A little backstory about this music. While Steve was putting this together, you know, like a few weeks ago, he previewed it to me, and we were sitting there listening to it. And of course, I was, you know, back in the 80s, I was into disco. Not really that great of a dancer, but, you know. I'm sitting here wiggling in my chair and bebopping to the beat. And then I hurt my back. I hurt my back wiggling in the chair. I suffered for about a day and a half because of that. So I had to remember not to do wiggling when the new intro comes on. But hey, it's retro. I like it.
Yeah, truthfully, you, Grass, you said you're an old stick with classic rock. That's actually at the same time classic rock was going on. That is a
dude.
That is a 70s,
late 70s, early 80s was a good time to be alive. We had disco music and we had the greatest classic rock music ever. And I'm a classic rock fan myself. I love it. Love it.
So people are excited about this episode because they're already talking about this in chat about what's going to happen. So we have 3 stories allegedly of Bigfoot bodies from the Mount St. Helens eruption. And one of this was put out there a couple of years ago where this guy, I don't know if he read these stories or however, but he read 3 separate stories that he got from this. And this is only part 1 of the Mount St. Helens Bigfoot series because there's other ones where there's another one where they actually interviewed a gentleman that claimed to be part of this whole cabal. So we're going to get a hold of that one soon, and we're gonna play the game there as well with that. Let me just straighten the area. That's a little better. It was a little crooked.
Straighten up there.
Straighten up, Steve. Straighten up, Kulls. So that's the story behind this. So we have 3 stories tonight. We may run over an hour tonight. Usually we do an hour on Fridays, but we do have it's about 12, 13 minutes worth of audio to listen to these stories. And we're going to talk about it because one of the things you're going to see is here is my research, and it is not thin. It is very,
Right.
very thick as to what military units were there, as to what occurred there, because there's a lot of claims in these, and are they true? And it's kind of funny as I'm going through it, just on a personal, as I was going through story number 1, I was like, well, he's right there. He's correct there. I'm like, a lot of these are correct. But then we'll see if everything, that's right. They did recover a platypus on Mount St. Helens, Kaiser. Yep. And so Grasshopper's got a red baron in the oven.
All right.
But anyway,
Tony's and Red Baron. Oh yes,
that's right.
Send us some pizzas, okay?
See, I got the Walmart frozen pizza right here.
Yeah, it's cardboard with some tomato, or I won't say tomato sauce, but it's red sauce on it.
Red paint.
Red paint with cardboard. Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into our roll call for tonight. First in tonight was Walter Kroll saying, looking forward to an explosive episode. I see what you did there.
Walter, that was good.
And we got Bigfoot Society. Jeremiah, what's up, brother?
Welcome.
Pete H, good to see you, my man. Grasshopper, of course. Ristel, what's happening? Helton, a.k.a. Faster Man, good to see you, my brother. Yeah. Sandra Piper, what's happening? Jen, the bouncer, what's up? Hey, Jen. Hopefully your office assistant is ready to go. Mine is his position as usual. Karen Fisher, good to see you tonight.
Welcome, Karen, good to see you.
Nikki, Sasquatch Secrets, hello.
Nikki.
Smedley, do right. Hello, Volcano killed my Bigfoots, he writes. Here's a new one, Pancho Zorch. Hello, Pancho. Good to see you. We got a lot of new subscribers, so feel free to say hello. Get your name mentioned.
Yeah. Good to see everybody.
Yep. The Susie Monster. There's another
Susie
new name
Monster.
as well. Oh, welcome, Susie.
What a great name. That's cool.
Yep. Little Kilroy was here. Little Kilroy in the house as usual. Brian McMahon. Kaiju Ninja 1985. Hello. Gary Johnson Sr. Hello. Arthur Watch. Hello, brother.
Arthur.
Who else do we got in here? I'm moving right along here.
It's hopping. I'm lost again.
David Parker is in, and Mick is in the house as well.
Hey, Mick. Dave.
So, and to all our lurkers out there, hello, welcome aboard. To all our new subscribers, we're getting tons of new subscribers every day. So welcome. And eventually we're going to get these uploaded. I always do a batch upload when I do shows that go to Spotify and all for the audio listeners. And we'll probably be doing that next week. And I got to say that if, again, as always, for those that are listening on the audio side only, always check back with the video side, because we always put some pretty neat graphics up there and stuff. And you can do the chat replay and see what people are talking about in chat. So it's a good time. But again, everybody, and to all our new folks there, welcome. Make yourself at home. Kick yourself up a chair. Put your feet up. Grab your favorite beverage. Grab some popcorn. And off we go. So, Chris, I got to tell you, the amount of abuse I take from people. Horrible. Look at this one. Look at this one. So a picture was posted by Mike Ann at the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Camping Adventure, and Pat Collins, who's not here tonight, coincidentally, but he will be on replay, says, "You look good, Mike, but Steve Kulls could use a shave." Yep, that's what I get. And then, of course, my response is, "What happens when I don't have my morning coffee?"
Yeah, that's pretty good.
So today hang on, I hit something that did not go right here. There we go. So today we're going to be talking about the Mount St. Helens eruption and alleged Bigfoot bodies. And what I have here is a Google map of where, story number 1 claims he went up to Tootle, to the area of Tootle. And we're going to let that play out. But I wanted to show people the blast zone. I have another graphic, which I don't have up, but like Spirit Lake, where that is, was completely obliterated right after preceding the eruption.
Yeah.
And there's something people miss, I think, in all these Bigfoot stories. And the issue I have is people think that Mount St. Helens was there was some earthquakes, and then boom, in May, I believe 18th, it blew up. But that's not the case. In actuality, Mount St. Helens had a minor eruption and an ash and steam release in April the previous month.
Yeah. They were watching it.
Yeah, it opened up. It opened up the crater, and it started cracking the edge on the north side of the mountain. And so, my wife, in all her ultimate wisdom, made a really good comment. She goes, why would the Bigfoot hang around, on the mountain when you're having all these earthquakes and you had the minor eruption, a month earlier, right? And then you're having melt, the snow, the mountain's starting to get warm, so the caps on the mountain are starting to melt. Right. You're getting earthquakes every day, numerous times a day. And in all our stories, I'm going to make a prerequisite. None of this is mentioned. Right. And we're going to talk about, and I agree, Grasshopper, it was bulging and quakes for weeks ahead of the blast. Right. The side of the mountain bulged out 500 feet in that month. And that's not a small amount. That is a large amount. It was like 5 feet a day that mountain was moving. That bulge was moving until finally off it went. So let's listen to our story number 1, and we'll talk about it afterwards. So give me 1 second here to swap over to the story. Now, once we start the story, we can't stop it. It's got to play out. So we'll just let that play out. And here we go. This is story number 1. This gentleman is talking about his father working for a logging company during the Mount St. Helens eruption. And here we go.
I work for Weyerhaeuser Company at Green Mountain, Washington, east of Vancouver. The site has security on the roads to check on the equipment and check closed areas to keep people out. My father was working the day Mount St. Helens blew up. He was at a meeting in Kelso, Washington, and as he was a supervisor, when Mount St. Helens blew its side out, all heck cut loose. My father was sent back to Green Mountain right away, but like most, he wasn't allowed to go very far because of the mudslide coming down the river. He did get to the town of Toutle, Washington, on Highway 504 off of I-5. He and his crew were placed at different spots to watch mud flow and, of course, help people get out of the blast zone after the major blow-up. He was sent to the area of Spirit Lake to keep people out. When the second major blow-up of the mountain came, my father and the other guy with him reported in, and then they got out of there. He was then placed in charge of the helicopter landing zone. It was his job to keep people out of the landing zone and let aid crews in so they could care for the injured. Later, when all the people were out and bodies out, the National Guard was brought in to clean up. They hauled dead animals out that they placed in piles, deer in one, elk in another, and so on. They were covered up with tarps and later burned. But my father was placed in charge of one pile of dead that were covered and no one was allowed to go near. Armed United States National Guard personnel were around this pile, and one day when they were going to move this group of bodies, and my father was very close to it and was told to keep his mouth closed. And when the tarps were removed, he saw the creatures. Some badly burned and some not. They placed them in a net and lifted them into a truck, covered it over. My father asked the guardsmen what they will do with them, and he said study them or whatever. He didn't want to know. He said it's like other things you just don't ask. And off they went, and no one knows what happened to them. My father and the rest were debriefed and sent home.
Oh, you're muted, Steve.
I know. I get that message as soon as I saw it, so we're good. Yeah, I know. What do you guys think? I think something stinks there a little bit. How about
There's
you?
a problem. There's some problems. Yeah.
So from one of the aspects, he talks about they were positioned near Spirit Lake to keep people out. Well, number one, after the eruption, nobody could get near Spirit Lake.
Yeah.
Spirit Lake was wiped out when the initial blast, within seconds of the blast. Spirit Lake was wiped out, and it was wiped out via the pressure was that of it created a 300 foot wave that basically wiped out the entire lake, and eventually it settled back in. But when it settled back in 200 feet higher. There was no passable roads in that area.
Right.
Now, here's the interesting thing. So now that's just one part. Let's go into the next part. And I'm going to address this part. Skeptical about notion of elk and other known animals being collected after the eruption. And believe it or not, I did a little research, and they did. They collected bear, elk, deer, whatever other critters, so the National Forestry Service could do an accurate count on approximating the amount of dead. And what they did with those animals was a lot of them they necropsied, or AKA that's an animal autopsy. They didn't burn them. They actually examined them to find the causes of death.
Right.
People don't understand. There was a lot of science in play at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. These animals died because of a volcanic eruption, so they wanted to look inside.
Now, the other thing, too, is people didn't realize there was a lot of farms around the area and the outstanding area, and a lot those farms got abandoned with very little visits to keep the livestock alive, basically, during the ramp up to the eruption. Yeah. And what had occurred was that a lot of those animals had died of asphyxiation due to the heavy ash count in the air. So that's another reason. And actually, doing my research, I actually found a cart that they had placed sheep in that had died off of one of them. But I did find out somewhere in here.
I remember back when this happened. Of course, I was alive and well back then. But we watched the local news, and they were talking about it for about a week. Every night they were talking about the ash cloud and how it could be drifting east, and everybody was worried. It could cause problems. Yeah.
It did. I remember how hazy it was for days. That just drifted across. But the pyroclastic flows, which is, and the lahars, they actually flowed towards the west, because that's where all the tributaries would go out into the Pacific Ocean. But there would be no way he could get anywhere near Spirit Lake. And here's the interesting thing. The guy claims that his father worked for Weyerhaeuser logging crews. And this is what I found out, that Weyerhaeuser logging crews were actively working in the region on the morning of the eruption, unaware that the volcano would erupt with such force. The company had been closely monitoring the situation in the weeks leading up to the eruption, but continued logging operations until the disaster occurred. So, actually, tragically, several of, and this is why I know it's not real, is that, they're talking about, well, I was posted to keep people out. Weyerhaeuser's main objective there, although they did assist in search and rescue, because they were loggers, they knew the area. Well, Nobody knew the area after that. Pilots would say, we have no identifiable remarks.
Yeah, changed the whole look of the entire landscape.
Right. But this whole story fails to mention is that Weyerhaeuser lost several of their employees in the eruption. They were working nearby in logging camps, and tragically, several of the Weyerhaeuser's employees lost their lives in the eruption. The unexpected nature and massive scale of the blast, with a lateral explosion of ash, rock, and gas, overwhelmed many of those who were working in the logging camps.
Yeah.
There's no mention of that. That would be their priority number one. Right. It's not the garden area, but priority number one is, what about our people?
recover their people. That should have been the mission. Yeah.
Dad is supposed to be a supervisor. So it's just the fact that there's no mention that any of the Weyerhaeuser people had passed. Sounds a little like you're skimming a little, you're telling a tale. And again, we know that hoaxers, if they don't do the research, Weyerhaeuser, I know that's a logging crew up there or a timber company. So let me, and that'll be the story. And they don't really look into the depth of it.
Well, the guys in there that were logging that got hit by the pyroclastic cloud, that was like probably a terrible way to go.
Well, and here's the interesting thing. He says, well, my father was working up in Green Mountain, on that day, and then he came down to Kelso, Washington. It's as you see on that map, that blue line that runs up the left side there.
Yeah,
that's the Green Mountain is over 100 miles away from Mount St. Helens. So we expect him to come down, and it turns out it's like a 3.5 hour drive to Kelso for a meeting. And then when it erupts, he's going to shoot back up to Tootle and then get into Spirit Lake eventually. And of course, none of that's going to happen.
No.
A lot of that stuff, again, and I'm going to ring this, and this is something that's going to be ringing true throughout this whole thing, is that the eruption lasted throughout the day. It just wasn't a blast and that was it. It was over and done with. It lasted, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, anywhere from 7 to 9 hours afterwards. So that was continuous. There were 57 casualties. Of course, the most famous would be Harry Truman, who lived on Spirit Lake at the lodge and refused to leave. And of course, I believe his name was Paul Johnston, who was the volcanologist who was at Coldwater Coldwater Ridge, which now has been renamed Johnston Ridge. So
that was there's a documentary about him too, Steve.
And Grass, you're absolutely right. I-5 was closed because the Tootle River, so there would be really no way for them to make their way anywhere near Spirit Lake, right? And he acts like they could just drive in, and that. So people say, well, geez, well, what about the Bigfoot? Why are we not getting into the Bigfoot? Because if the initial story is garbage, the rest of it's too. Obviously, this guy was not here, or it's just a made up story because everything leading up to it has been incorrect. And now let's get into this other point is. Okay, so if there are Bigfoot bodies and they're trying to act like it's top secret, right? You're not going to let civilian contractors just walk in there without a security clearance.
Exactly. Yes.
Right? You just don't do that. And let alone the comment that afterwards we were debriefed. No, you weren't.
No.
They don't debrief civilians.
No. I've got a couple of points about that whole deal.
Fire away, Chris. That's your area.
For one, if they have a top secret mission, they're not going to send the National Guard guys. The National Guards are deployed in cases of emergency. They're not, don't get me wrong. I love you National Guard guys, but when you're in the regular military, they call you the weekend warriors. Okay. And so the first thing that would have happened is if National Guard had been exposed to and seen Bigfoot, is as soon as he got back home from that weekend of work or whatever, he would have told everybody, hey, they got Bigfoot. We got Bigfoot. We got burnt dead Bigfoot bodies everywhere. That was the first point. The second point, the military would have sent in a regular detail of guys with security clearance to take care of any dead Bigfoots. And the second thing was, like Steve pointed out, no civilians are allowed in any kind of area like that where something is secret is going on. They would have been stopped, a mile away, nowhere near. He couldn't have got nowhere near it. No way possible.
Kaiju Ninja, do you think they expected to find Bigfoot buddies? Absolutely not. You got to understand when that mountain blew, we had the great Jay Birchon from Bigfoot Barbecue, who lives on Mount St. Helens, who is part of the National Guard during that. The magnitude of that eruption was 50 atomic bombs. Right? People don't understand that. That area was devastated for 15 miles. 15 miles. You know, that would be like a bomb going off in my nearby town of Saratoga and affecting me here, which is unthought of because I live about 9 miles from there.
Yeah.
So, and then the other stuff you had to deal with, the lahars and the pyroclastic flows, and
Right.
and then you're talking about ash deposits coming down, helicopters. The intake engines of the helicopters were suffering and from aircraft
Yes.
because they were sucking in that ash, which is not great for engines. They need
Right.
air.
Yeah.
So when the air is being choked, it's choking your engine. So there was a lot of different things going on, and many
I can't
different.
remember the name of the documentary, but it was a geologist that was stationed where in full view of Mount St. Helens, and he was there when it exploded. And I can't remember his name. He died, but he was there when it exploded, and he knew, being a volcanologist and a
Yeah,
geologist.
that was Paul Johnston.
Paul. Okay,
Yeah.
rest his soul. But he knew,
Or maybe it was Roger Johnston.
when he saw that eruption and he saw the pyroclastic cloud coming, he knew beforehand that he was dead. He could not survive it. He knew. And so knowing that dread, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, you know, that had to make his death that much worse.
Well,
And, horrible.
I think he half expected it. Like, if it's going to come, he's going to witness it. And that way, the greatest thing he can see. Yeah. I don't know. I kind of like to live myself, but they didn't have webcams back in 1980. Now they could set up webcams and remote cameras.
Let those melt instead of people. Right.
Yep.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Now, here's the other thing, too, is another interesting factoid about the Mount St. Helens eruption. Out of the 57 people that died during the Mount St. Helens eruption on May 18th, 1980, only 45 of the bodies were recovered. Right?
Yeah.
So anything that was in the vicinity of that mountain, especially in the direction of that blast, like I do not believe they ever found Harry Truman. I mean, like I said, that whole area, Spirit Lake, was buried under 250 feet of the north face of that mountain that just slid right down, boom, and blew out. Created the wave, pushed it out. When it came back, all that sediment was in there. So the lodge and everything is definitely, yes, David Johnson. Thank you.
It was David Johnston. Yeah.
Thing is, I know a Paul Johnson, and that's.
I had to look it up, man, because I couldn't remember. But I can't remember what the name of the documentary is, but it's good. It's good.
Yeah,
it's
there's
like
a lot of
1 hour
really
piece.
good stuff. So, with that being said, are we ready for story number 2? Chris?
Let's hear it. I'm ready.
All right, story number 2, a little bit longer.
That's okay.
So let's pop over there, and here is story number 2.
I was a National Guardsman at the Mount St. Helens site, and this is the first time I ever spoken about what I saw firsthand. I lived in Spokane, Washington, and was 24 at the time this all took place. I was placed on a special cleanup crew further up the mountain. A large tent was set up, and it was to be guarded by armed soldiers who were not part of the National Guard. There were numerous soldiers on the scene that were not members of the Guard. We were given a briefing by a soldier who said that after he spoke to us, we would forget about him and what he said at the end of the mission. This was strange, as we never dealt with anything like this before. Myself and 4 other guardsmen were told to follow a group of soldiers and not to speak to each other and to remain very quiet overall. We were told to get into a Jeep and wait. We sat in the Jeep for maybe a half an hour. Eventually, another Jeep arrived carrying a civilian and another member of the military. The civilian was brought into the tent, and he emerged a few minutes later, followed by a large, hairy creature. It looked like a large man covered in fur, and the best way to describe it was like Beast from X-Men, only brown. This creature looked to have some burns and had a bandage on its arm. At first we were afraid, but when it walked by, we could see its eyes, and it just looked very sad and somber. He climbed into the back of the pickup with the civilian, and the two were speaking in a weird language I had never heard. It would cough at times. We followed the truck to different areas. There were 5 total stops. Each time we stopped, we were told to follow the civilian and the creature. Each time we followed them to rocky areas where there were caves. The creature would make a sound and then listen. First area, he made a sound, and we all just waited in silence. After a few minutes, the creature looked at the civilian and then at the ground. The civilian at one point touched his shoulder and called for a canteen to give the creature a drink. The same thing happened at the next area, but this time there was a response to the sound. After a few minutes, 2 soldiers emerged from the cave carrying a badly burned creature, just like the one with the civilian. The creature bent down next to it and looked at it over for about 5 minutes. It then spoke softly with the civilian. It turned and walked back to the truck, and we were told to follow. As we were walking away, we heard a shot, and we knew it was one of the soldiers putting the creature out of its misery. Wow. There was no response at the 3rd or 4th site, but at the 5th there was another return sound to the creature. This time it was different, and soldiers carried out a creature with a badly burned left leg. We were then ordered to all help get the very large stretcher from the truck and help place the creature on it and carry it back to the truck. We then immediately returned to the base camp. The creature was carried into the tent while the other creature and the civilian spoke. We were ordered to stay in the Jeep until we were to be debriefed. As the creature turned to walk into the tent, it looked at us and made a waving gesture with his hand. We took it as a thank you for what we had done. By the time we were ordered out of the Jeep, we were all in shock. We were called over to an area to be debriefed, and it was just strange. I will never forget what was said because it was just not what was expected. I thought I would hear, listen, you took an oath and now you need to live up for it for your country, with a threat also implied. A different high-ranking soldier just said, look, do you all really want an explanation? You saw what we were doing. These creatures do live in these areas. They mean no harm and want to be left alone. Do you really want to do anything that may cause them any trouble? They are like us in a lot of ways. If you need or want to talk about this, just wait about 30 years. By that time, there will be likely no reason to keep them as secrets. We were then ordered back to the guard camp because they were breaking it up so nobody saw too much and knew everything that happened. We did not speak of it, and after a few months, I just took the attitude that these things live out there, and honestly, my life is no different because of it. I only bring it up now because people have been writing a lot about the Mount St. Helens, and I believe that the whole story should be told. I will also say this. I like to camp and hike and have done so many times throughout the Northwest. Every time I would look for signs of these creatures, tracks, listen for sounds, etc. I never saw or heard anything other than what I did that day on Mount St. Helens. Wow.
And there you have it. So I have a lot of issues with this story, obviously. Number one, the fact that, we had a camp on the mountainside, right? What mountainside?
It must have been a different one. Yeah.
Now, mind you, that heavy volcanic activity continued for over 2 months in that area. Earthquakes, more ash, more landslides, more, So let's cut to the chase. He acts like, again, the whole vehicle thing could move in and out of there. Fact is, nobody could move vehicles in and out of there. The roads were devastated. They were wiped out. The only real way in was by helicopter. That was it.
Well, the one believable part I thought was he said they had regular soldiers there, and they told the National Guardsmen, you guys, you need to go over here.
Wow.
That's possible. That's possible.
But it also adds that fact of plausible denial that now there's like this we have this super secret group that comes in,
Right.
takes care of the Bigfoot.
Yeah.
And the fact is, if you have this super secret group that takes care of the Bigfoot, why would they call in the National Guard in the first place to be there as extra witnesses or,
Right.
more leaks? You wouldn't do that,
Nope.
right?
That's right.
Just look at Operation Neptune Spear. It was completely contained within a group. And they had a group of Army Rangers on standby. Now, in case you're wondering what Neptune Spear was, that was the Osama bin Laden mission. And that was run by Navy SEALs. And they had a group of Rangers on standby, but they had no idea what they were on standby for. Because everything is compartmentalized. It's on a need-to-know basis in the military. You know that, Chris.
Right. That's right. You got to have a need to know. And if you don't have a need to know, you don't get to know.
And yeah, agreed, David. There's no mention of anybody wearing masks, because you couldn't breathe in that area, especially being so close. If you're on the mountain, you're in a very heavy ash area. And
yeah, that's true, Lori. Yeah, that's the way it is in the military. When you try to inquire about something, like in records or something,
right.
The first thing the people ask you that's involved with the record keeping is, what is your need to know?
Now,
because if you don't have a legitimate reason, sorry. Well, I was just curious. No, that's not a need to know. No.
One commonality between the first story and the second story is that keyword debrief.
Right.
Like they're in on some sort of secret. And again, that shows the grandiosity of the person telling the story. Oh, God, it was so important. We had to be debriefed. And the funny thing is, you talk to a lot of UAP witnesses that they weren't debriefed. They were just told, shut up, don't talk about it. Right? They weren't debriefed. Because obviously, why would you debrief? If you witness something like that, what would be the purpose of debriefing?
Yeah.
Right? No purpose at all. Debriefing would be each person gives their own personal report of what had occurred. That's
at the best, there would have been a small gathering of the troops, and the commander would have come out and said, if you guys saw anything today, keep your mouth shut. You didn't see nothing. It's all covered under military secrecy.
Right. And this whole other thing about, just wait 20 years. Come on. Who says that?
No, they wouldn't have said that. No,
right,
they would not have said that. No. Don't believe it for a second.
The officer would not have gone into an editorial rant.
Yeah. Well, some of the things he described in there about the Bigfoot having a conversation.
P.N. Hassett says this is over 40 years ago. There were stories Black Ops soldiers were talking to Bigfoot. Usually the government treats everything as expendable. But the issue here is that everything that these people are saying, it's impossible for them to be where they're claiming to be. Like, here's this eruption going on. And now we're just going to hang out on the mountain. But people forget, and what happens is 20 years down the road, people forget that this wasn't a one-off. The eruption just didn't happen. Okay, it's done. No, it went on for 7, 8, 9 hours. It lasted, and throughout the course of the next 2 months, there was other volcanic activity, more ejections of ash, more ejections of and I agree, PN. I believe in that Patterson Gimlin film as well. I'm leaning that's a real thing. And we forgive the auto.
Right, David.
It's all good.
David says any searches for survivors would have had to have been done by air. He's right.
Exactly. And then there was a mention of them going into caves. Impossible, because those cave systems were very active. There would be the possibility of releasing of gases. Like sulfur dioxide and ammonium nitrate and all that stuff, and methane and all the other stuff that comes up from these volcanic eruptions, and not one of them mentions anything about lightning as well, because when you have such a mass ejection of ash, you get a big static electricity charge. So there's lightning shots going around too, bang 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 as this is going on. In fact, one of the the woman that was in a plane, the geologist that was in a plane flying around the area, that they missed getting blasted out of the air by about 10 seconds. And as they passed, they caught that eruption because they were on the backside of it. And as they're flying around, you could see the lightning charges coming down on and off of that. So I'm not sure how many aftershocks necessarily. Kaiju asked how many aftershocks. Multiples, hundreds. Volcanic activity, like in that morning leading up to it, it was very quiet. But I believe the actual rumblings were a little bit less after the eruption, but they still continued on, and they were in the hundreds. And previous to the eruption, they were in the thousands. And again, in mid-April, there was a release of ash. In April, there was a little minor eruption where it spit out some steam and ash, and it cracked the north face. One would think, and of course the caps started to melt on Mount St. Helens, because that's 9,000. Mount St. Helens was like 9,200 feet tall, or 9,000 something feet tall. When all was said and done, it was under 8,000 feet. So it lost 1,000 feet off the top of it, just gone. But
some of the things that you talked about.
But Kaiju, just to let you know, there was no lava. There was no lava flow during the initial eruption. It was completely what caused the eruption was there was a blockage in the vent. And what happens is that this is how it's explained. My understanding, of course, I've been on this topic for a couple of weeks now. So what happens is that cap is on top of that. For whatever reason, the vent got covered up after that little initial spouting. The vent gets covered up. The side starts bulging out because it's covered up. And water gets superheated to the point where it should be a gas. But since it's not exposed to the air, it can't be a gas. And what happens is that pressure builds up. And then when that little hole emerges in that vent that lets the air in, that water that's at 1,000 degrees, which should be steam, right? It hits the air and it automatically turns to steam, and all that pressure comes out at once.
A lot of it has to do with the viscosity of the lava too, that's inside the mountain or inside the volcano. Like
technically, it's magma.
Yeah. In like Hawaii and some places in on the continent of Africa, we're in South Africa. They have very fluid flow of lava, and that's able to escape and run out. But Mount St. Helens had a very thick, very viscous, heavy, dense lava, with the flow.
Right, and with the ash content in the water, that's what they call a lahar, and that's what took out most of the stuff. So so that story has a lot of holes in it too. I want to see if there's any other notes that I have on that.
Grasshopper said the flooding was from the snow melting. It everything liquefied. Everything, all the snow that was on the mountain liquefied, and there it went. It was huge. I saw a TV show or a movie. What was that movie where they showed a mud flow from a volcano eruption, and it wasn't Mount St. Helens, but it was something else. But it's just like that. Yeah, you have a whole big wall of water and mud flowing, and it just takes out everything.
On my notes about the second story, this is what I have. The National Guard set up command posts in areas surrounding the blast zone. These posts were used to coordinate search and rescue missions, logistical operations, and recovery efforts. The base camps served as hubs for communication and deployment of personnel into devastated areas. These camps were often located at the periphery of the red zone. So, and I don't necessarily have that in the zones, but obviously they were all outside of that particular area. Following the Mount St. Helens eruption of May 18th, 1980, seismic activity continued for an extended period. The volcanic activity and associated earthquake persisted as part of the ongoing geological response to the eruption. And the timeline, here's a timeline. So in the days and weeks immediately following the eruption, there were numerous aftershocks. These were smaller but still significant earthquakes resulting from volcanic activity and the adjustments of the Earth's crust caused by the eruption. No mention of that. Why would you would not put a camp on the side of a mountain that's adjusting? That's logistically a bad news and puts people at risk, does it not?
Well,
For several months after the eruption, seismic activity continued as Mount St. Helens. Aftershocks were frequent, though they were generally diminished in intensity over time. So the year following the eruption, earthquake activity remained notable for up to a year after the eruption. Frequency and magnitude of the earthquakes gradually decreased as the volcanic system adjusted and stabilized. So,
one of the other things that kind of really made me squirm on this story, he's talking about the Bigfoot that was treated and was assisting in searching for other Bigfoots, and this large creature could communicate with the civilian there.
sure.
So they had some sort of language they're speaking back and forth. And yet when they found one member of the Bigfoot family of his or whatever, it was hurt, so they shot it.
Yeah. Well, here's the other thing, too, is the injury says, it had a badly burnt left leg. How does something just get a badly burnt left leg in a volcanic eruption? You're going to be burned everywhere. There's no escaping it.
So we go from assigning human qualities and traits, including language, to the creature, to treating it like a wounded animal that you're putting out of its misery. That doesn't make sense.
If we're looking at the chart here, the red indicates the pyroclastic flows, and the brown indicates the lahars. So that's a good representation of what exactly happened there. And like I said, you could not put anything on that mountain because of the mud flows and the lahars that were going on, even on the south side of the mountain, which was, geographically unaffected by the eruption, but it was still devastated nonetheless because of the heat. Like people said, when that sucker blew up, that ash is hundreds of degrees hot. That melts people. You're in the middle of that. Why would there be any bodies left in that area of Mount St. Helens? They would be melted and lost. They would be burned to a crisp. So, anything else, Chris, on this one?
No, that was just one of the things that really disturbed me about the story is how we go from assigning human traits and language to the creature. Then when we find another creature,
anthropomorphism, my brother, anthropomorphism.
We shoot it because it's injured so badly. It's like, well, we were talking to Chris, and we went out and we found Steve, and he was injured. He had a burn on his leg, so we put him out of his misery.
Well,
they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't do that. They would give Steve medical attention and whatever.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, Grass. Ash clouds went all the way to the north to Rainier. So, flying or driving was very hampered. They would have to come in from the south, and they couldn't fly directly near it because it would just clog up everything. I know they canceled a lot of but a lot of airline flights going over that area. They did that in actuality when Iceland had the major eruption, I think 5 years ago. Or maybe it was, I'm sorry, not 4 or 5 years ago, but a while back, maybe in the 20 teens, Europe had to cancel numbers of flights because of the ash content of that eruption.
Right.
And that was, I actually heard, I tend to watch, I like watching the Undertaker podcast.
Yeah.
With Mark Calloway. And he was talking about his wife at the time, who was caught into that because his wife was a professional wrestler.
Right.
And they were touring Europe when that all had occurred. And they had to go all this cockamamie way to get, they were in Germany or Northern Europe. They had to go all the way down south to Spain and then fly south to get around that because of that, because so many
Yeah.
European flights were canceled. Ash, it does havoc to
And it should
aircraft.
be ABC should have it on file. Their footage that they had from news stories they did during that time. But it was the week after. It kept continuing every night. We would get an update on the news, and they would show, where the ash cloud was, and then they would show people in another state away brushing ash off their car.
Sure.
It looked like it snowed gray dust or something on it.
Absolutely.
But, I remember that was a big deal. It's like, oh wow, I couldn't believe it. History.
Okay, and yes, there's a little fact, people. Ape Canyon was not affected that because it's west of Mount St. Helens, and that was actually one of the few areas that was unaffected by it. It was west far enough that it did not. Again, it's west of it, so you can see the only areas, but it's not near those areas where the lahars and pyroclastic flows where it survived. So anyway, let's get on to story number 3, and this one is a little. This one's a little more interesting, and just so you know, Chris, this one is an Air Force story.
Oh yes! All right.
So I want you to listen. I want you to put your fine tuning caps, because Chris hasn't heard these stories. He's listening to you with the first time. So listen to this, and then when we're done, I'm going to ask you if any of this makes sense, because it certainly does not make sense to me. But we'll fire away on it anyway.
I was an airman in the Air Force in the 1980s. I was stationed at George Air Force Base from the late 70s to the early 80s. Our mission was the Wild Weasels, or Air Force F-4s, that would go into a war area before it started, like the first Gulf War, at low level and pop up and then light them up on the ground to air defenses and then shoot anti-radiation missiles at the sites, letting the other aircraft get in. In 1980, we were shipped to train with the Canadian Forces at COMEX CFB on Vancouver Island. We took a C-141 from George to Canada. Our C-141 had an in-flight emergency, and we had to land at Travis Air Force Base in Northern California for repair. We were losing hydraulic fluid in one engine, and I saw the crewman come back and dump several cans of hydraulic fluid into the reservoir, and it just went back to zero. He had a parachute, and we didn't. Kind of made me nervous, but we later got back on our way and flew over St. Helens right after it blew its top. Once we got to COMEX, our officer in charge told us we would be there for longer than the 2 weeks due to an emergency mission that they needed help on. We were all specialized airmen trained in different specialties in aircraft maintenance and repair, but we were soldiers first, and we did lots of other stuff that our country needed. We were there for a couple days not doing anything because, as I look back, they were trying to figure out how to use us. Then we all got on a bus and we were bused to an area around the south end of the island and were picked up on a strange naval ferry. I was never in the Navy, so I don't know anything about boats, but our bus was tied down and delivered to the United States side, and we drove off. It was under darkness, and it was typically cloudy and rainy as we continued our bus ride to the disaster area. We were given M16s and one mag, which I found fascinating because most Air Force enlisted troops shoot a gun in basic, and you may never see an M16 again. We were also given ill-fitting green helmets marked guard, ill-fitting plain green BDFs, and told to follow orders we were to be given in the upcoming briefing. In the briefing, we were told we would be guards to special areas and told to check credentials and to only allow people in who had the correct credentials in the military tent areas that were set up what looked to be like perimeter of an area affected by the eruption. We had no idea where we were at. There were no towns or cities around where we were, and we arrived there. We were about 30 airmen completely and totally confused on what was going on. We slept in a tented area that was near where we worked. We had a mess tent next to the tent where we slept, and we didn't leave that area about an acre size for a week or more. Most of us, if not all of us, were guarding areas that people moved into and out of what looked like victims. The tents we guarded had a foyer area, and we couldn't see what was behind the second door. It was brightly lit, and you had to go through a couple of partitions to get to the main area of the tent. I assume they were there to prevent peeping into the tents by the guards. It was very infrequent that anyone would walk in and out. and we worked 12-hour shifts only at night. We were used to working 12-hour shifts because this was just after the Iranian crisis, and we would go on alert every 3 weeks. Work 12-hour shifts, flying as many missions as we could, then have a day off, then another alert, and 3 more weeks of 12-hour shifts for 3 more weeks. We were told that if anyone tried to breach our area, to shoot. That never happened or came close to happening. This was funny to me because we were given 1 magazine, and I don't know if the bullets were real or not. We were Air Force, not Marines. I knew more about a 5-iron than an M16, but nothing ever came up. The only time anyone came up to the area I was guarding only happened after midnight, and it looked to me like a doctor in a white lab coat with either a patient or victim who was wrapped in what looked like overcoats and our night shift navy blue ski caps. You could never see the person who was led into or out of the tents because they had their hands in the coats and were let into the tent by the arm. I think I was there for 8 to 9 days, and it was the most unusual thing I had ever experienced in the Air Force. Last part out of those nights on guard, I noticed 2 of the people that were escorted in were very, very tall. That's the only thing I noticed, that those very tall people. I was not in a position to see how tall they were, but it was obviously that they were over a whole head higher than the doctor, if that's what they were. Only the escort talked, and they only mentioned their last name and showed their badge. I don't know if they were Army or civilian. The other thing I noticed was that the escorted people, in quotations, were really, really wide. But I always assumed until now that it was the coats that they were wearing. It was very nippy, and I also assumed we were at some kind of altitude. After that, we were given a debrief that we had helped a lot of the people who were victims, in quotes, of the eruption. That's all we were told. Victims, in quotes. And told that we were not to mention this part of our tour of duty. After our last shift, and I don't know how long that was, but it was longer than a week, we were allowed to sleep. And the next evening, we were allowed to shower. We were only allowed skin baths and washcloths until then in another tent that was behind the latrine tent and chow tent. Given back our original Air Force uniforms and put back on the same bus we rode in and bused back to the same area under darkness. Ferried back to Vancouver Island and back to COMEX CFB, and we continued our tour of duty as if nothing happened. We did 2 more weeks of flying sorties with the Canadians, played and drank a ton of Canadian beer, Labatt's Blue, and flew in our C-141s back to George Air Force Base. It was all a big mystery on what happened until I read more about the Mount St. Helens creature stories. It seems similar. They must have really been short on personnel to use a bunch of Air Force kids as guards.
I think we've had enough of that story. So, all right, Chris, what have you got?
Well, if you're in the Air Force, you don't keep M16 with you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. No, there is a rifle for every personnel stored at the armory on base. And as far as him saying you don't get to, he didn't know what it did or whatever, didn't know how to use it. You have small arms training, which is a refresher you go to every so many months. It may be once a year or something other, but yeah, you're continuously training with small arms. So yeah, him not knowing about the M16s and stuff is not very good, not very believable at all.
Well, you know what I found interesting is he starts off again. When people are fabricating a story, this happens very often.
Right.
There is this shift that, well, once a soldier, you're a soldier first.
Yeah.
Well, if he's a soldier first, then all of a sudden he turns around like saying, well, I don't know nothing about an M16. Well, wait a minute. You just said you were a soldier first.
Yeah.
Right. So you have that dynamic shift in there. And as interrogator and interviewer, that would be a huge inconsistency in the story. Right off.
Let me tell everybody that may not be familiar with it. When you do your annual small arms training, or ever how many months it is, you go in, you're issued your rifle, you shoot the rifle, you qualify on the shooting range, and then you bring the rifle back inside, completely disassemble it 100%. Every nut, bolt, pin, You disassemble the trigger group, you clean it, and you put it all back together, nicely oil it, and then it goes back in the armory for next time. So,
Right.
yeah, believe me, if you know what an M16 does, and you know how to disassemble it, reassemble it, clean it, how to shoot it. So that's really, really questionable right there. But now the other part about him, when he says that he didn't know where they went. Okay, they're just told to get in here and go. They do. The Air Force does do that. They
Right.
will take you to a place and won't tell you. A lot of places they'll tell you if you're going somewhere, and they can tell you. They'll tell you when you're in the air on the way there. So some of that is believable. But this guy seems like to me he's somebody that knows somebody that's in the Air Force. He's heard a few stories, and then he's kind of made them his own.
So I may have a little add on to that one. So in my research, I had come across this website, and it's the 67 Airlift Wing of the United States Air Force.
Yeah.
Written by Aaron Lasley, the historian for the 67 Airlift Wing, from Joint Base Lewis McChord, Washington. In one quote, in one of the paragraphs, she writes, while immediately following the eruption, the Washington State Department of Emergency Services requested Air Force assistance for disaster relief and operations in the area surrounding the volcano.
Right.
A number of military aircraft command, aerospace rescue, and recovery units rushed in to rescue scores of people trapped by hot volcanic ash and mud flows. While helicopters continued to search for other survivors and the bodies of victims, other MAC units provided overhead communication links between helicopters and disaster relief agencies. And here we go. A C-141 Starlifter, doesn't that sound familiar? Right, and crew from the 63rd Military Aircraft Wing at Norton Air Force Base, California, had stopped at McChord to refuel during a routine mission to Alaska. While the aircraft was at McChord, the McChord command post received a call from the Washington DES for communications assistance. The C-141 diverted to the disaster area and flew above the site for almost 3 hours, relaying communications between the Washington DES and other aircraft involved in the operations.
Right.
So I'm almost wondering if he had read the same website and kind of got the whole C-141 story.
Very possible, yeah.
Let me kind of turn
right.
it a little bit, right? Because, mind you, they were. Did he say he was in Vancouver, Washington, or Vancouver, British Columbia?
Well, yeah, I think it was the. He didn't. I don't
he
think
was in Canada. He was in Canada.
Right, he was talking about drinking beer with the Canadians.
Right, he's in Canada. So just coincidentally, we have a United States Navy ferry there that can put a bus on there, and they had the bus all ready to go. Sounds like a bunch of horse manure to me. And again, nobody could drive into that area. You could have a Jeep at the time, and now we expect this like this charter bus to be able to travel into this area.
Yeah.
I call horseshit.
And
part of my friend.
I'll tell you what, they don't use Air Force personnel on the ground for stuff like this. They don't, because the Air Force was called the country club of the military, and all the other guys hated us. Okay, and that's okay. I understand.
Or if you were in the Navy, they called them the Air Farce.
Well, yeah, we weren't called. They didn't think of us as real soldiers, because usually we're behind the lines and we support aircraft. Okay, that was our job, to make sure those aircraft could go where they needed to go and do what they needed to do. You wouldn't typically send your Air Force guys out on a rescue mission or something. There is one exception. There's one exception. These guys are called pararescue.
Yes.
Now that's the Air Force version of a Green Beret. They are special forces, and they do not only do pararescue, they also do behind enemy lines stuff. That is kind of like SEAL Team 6, but you don't never hear about them.
Right.
They could have sent those guys in, but this guy is not one of those. No.
Now, and for me, again, Do I think there, Stephen Chris, do you think there were sweeps after the eruption to look for more room? I don't think there, I know the radius is crazy, makes me wonder if operations did that. No, absolutely not. Um, I think like, you got to understand, like Jay Birch made it very clear. You have a 15-mile radius area, covering probably about 270 degrees of the 360 degrees of that mountain that had basically been nuked multiple times. You have a lake that was there 1 minute, and within a week later, it's 250 feet higher than what it was because of all the debris and stuff. The area, even to this day, looks like a moonscape in certain areas. You can go to that area 44 years later and still see logs. In fact, even in Spirit Lake today, there are logs that were destroyed from the eruption 44 years ago. So I've, like I said, my research into this, watching a ton of videos. I watched the final one last night of a guy doing a flyby of the volcano and showing everybody all the different things and then flashing to the scenes.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how it's still a moonscape in a lot of areas. And that's an explosion without radiation. I mean, you look at the Chernobyl area has recovered better than the Mount St. Helens area has.
Everything
again,
is just sanitized,
and then we forget that St. Helens erupted again, I think, in the late 2000s, 2008, 2009. It erupted again, but it wasn't anything compared to what the initial eruption was. But it did put out a lot of ejecta and ash for a little bit, and then it just stopped again. So and Grass Spirit Lake still has a mat of logs from the mountain. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. The pilot who was flying around, it was really neat. He was flying around in his plane, and he's doing this GoPro video, and then he was showing scenes outside the plane because he had other GoPros going, and he's talking about exactly that.
Well, another thing this guy was talking about was the 12-hour shift deals. As that being like he'd been on that for weeks and weeks. Okay, sure. That's wrong. The standard duty day in the Air Force is from 07:30 in the morning to 16:30 in the evening, which is 7:30 to 4:30. The only exception is when you have wartime or you're under what they call a ORI, Operational Readiness Inspection. And then they go to a 24-hour cycle, which means a 12-hour shift for you, and then the 12-hour shift for the guy that comes in to replace you.
And the one thing that also ran kind of wrong with me is, they were there for weeks, but were never allowed to shower.
No,
and that would only breed disease, is what it was.
That's right. Believe me, the military will rig up a shower where you go out there. Have you ever seen MASH?
Oh yeah.
You could go out there and you could pull a chain and cold water will come down on you, and you're going to be clean in the military. Now, there's some place like during a wartime situation, if you're out in the field in the middle of a desert,
a little bit different.
Different. That's different. That's different.
But if you're setting up camps and you have a mess tent, you're going to have a tent with the loo and with a shower.
You're going to have a bathroom. You're going to have a shower. That's right.
Because without hygiene, that's going to breed disease.
Yes, exactly.
And if you think about it, they're there for weeks. Who's digging the latrine trenches, right?
Yeah.
Because I tell you what, McPherson's waste removal, they aren't showing up with the porta potties, right? Not on a volcanic mountain, right? So none of it legit. When you look at the actual logistics of what all of these people, and mind you, our second story again never mentions anything about things like a mess tent or any of the basics. The first guy failed to talk about any of the logging company's casualties.
Yeah.
And what their real mission was that in the first story, the logging company, although they assisted, basically they were the guys that say, okay, well, this should be here, that should be there. But for the main reason they were there was to provide equipment because they had the timber and earth moving equipment to help to help the National Guard and whoever the responders there to do that. And that was their main mission. So it's amazing how all of these guys, and we see this constantly in Bigfoot hoaxes. There was a guy many years ago tried to hoax me, tried to say he was a CB and talked about being a sniper for the CB and all that.
Right.
And wait, CBs don't have snipers, right? They always try to put more into it than they actually are.
A little dash of the truth, and then a big bunch of lie, and then followed by a little dash of truth.
And when you start digging, you start looking. Well, if I want more detail, I would hit him up. Well, where were the latrines? How was the camp set up? Can you tell me? Where was the latrines and all that? That should be memory recall if it really happened.
Right.
And if they tell you something that doesn't sound correct, like for example, if you have a latrine, you might interview them and they say, well, it was north of the camp, and north is uphill. You wouldn't put a latrine north of the camp coming downhill because all that sewage is going to come right down into your camp and promote more disease. Right? Well, disease is more than anything else.
The military is really good on making sure that there's a kitchen, so you can get fed. You got a place to sit down and eat, and they're good about bathrooms and showers. Because they got to keep you fed, they got to keep you clean and healthy, and then usually they'll give you a place to sleep. And even if it's just normally, the Air Force don't use tents. They'll put up a wood frame building, and they'll nail 10 on the side, and then that's your hotel. Okay, you may have a dirt floor, but you got walls around you.
Yep. You aware of any other events? Well, we're not done with the St. Helens. This is just part one. I believe there is an interview of a guy making claims that he was there during the body removal. So we're going to pull that one out. I'm going to give it a good listen to, and we're going to do that one at another time. So there's going to be a part 2 to this one eventually down the road. But I think tonight was really a good taste of, because I'm so sick and tired of hearing, oh, well, the bodies of Mount St. Helens. And, let's face it, if there were any Bigfoot that decided to stay on that mountain with all those earthquakes, I mean, let's face it. We often say that a Bigfoot takes off if us as human beings start inhabiting an area. Listen, I understand Mount St. Helens, huge area, but there was a lot of hikers that were going there on a constant basis. Remember, Mount St. Helens was known as America's Mount Fuji. It was very much visited by a lot of people. And that may be true. There may be reports of Bigfoot fleeing areas of fires and stuff like that. That to me sounds legit, but all these secret military government operations, it's almost like there's and that's just the nature of people that, I mean, what national security does Bigfoot represent? A national security threat? No, absolutely not. So the government is not going to invest millions and billions of dollars into a program to recover Bigfoot bodies. However, they will invest at least $22 million in 2008 to study UAPs, which are interfering with our military aircraft and buzzing our military, and could represent a national threat. They will spend $22 million to do that. So, but Bigfoot,
I want to know. You guys, I was hearing these stories with you guys in the chat for the first time too. Okay, so
and Chris, if I may just say one more thing to that.
Sure, babe.
If people think that the government is going to spend money on a program that does not affect national defense, they are so naive. So naive.
I'd say Bigfoot is probably not high on their priority list, but you guys heard these stories, same as me, the first time tonight, and I wasn't impressed with these. Did anybody find any of them impressive or believable?
Not at all. Not at all. And I just picked this one out of the blue. I was like, okay, I'm going to take 3 stories. Let's pick them out. Yeah. And when I heard these submitted stories, I'm like, wow, these are pretty bad. The first one actually sounded the most convincing because, yes, the Weyerhaeusen, they were a timber company.
Yeah,
they were active in Mount St. Helens.
So little truth. Yeah.
Little truth. So it may be somebody that worked for Weiserhausen and
Right.
decided that, hey,
Right.
let's have a little fun with this.
Yeah.
So but to me, it sounds like the missing elements is, again, they may be a local that knows of Weiserhausen, but doesn't know the fact that
Yeah.
Weiserhausen lost employees in the eruption and anything like that, and makes no mention of that. Because one would think, when you talk, when you listen to a veteran tell a World War II story, or you listen to people tell a story, you get those fine details.
Yeah.
And what you're getting in all of these, you're getting vague details. They may sound specific, but they're actually quite vague. If you think about, well, we were up on a mountainside. Well, what side of the mountain? What was the terrain? What was, how did you get into the area? There's these little vague bits. And when you get those vague bits, that's reminiscent of the Bigfoot peeper debunking, how there were specific areas that were left vague because with that vagueness, it makes it even harder for somebody to corroborate that. So the lack of any kind of corroboration helps the hoaxer in this case, or the storyteller, because they say, oh, well, you can't debunk it because I was vague about which way we traveled in.
Right.
And there was
Yeah.
and just from doing some hardcore research, you find out that, hey, this whole area was devastated. I mean, they really did not think these things out, and that's
with this last guy. Okay, he was making it. Now they were put into a bus, and it was secret. And well, wait a minute now. Now the Air Force will do that. They will put you in a plane, usually, or a bus. I don't know. I've not been shoved into a bus.
I remember these guys were there by accident when they were actually bused.
They will put you in a bus or put you on a plane, and won't tell you where you're going if there's a big reason, like it is secret.
Right.
But now, what they would have done in this case, if this guy's telling the truth, they would have probably shoved him in the bus and say, "Okay, guys, we're going to go over here to Mount St. Helens, and we're going to help try to search for survivors, or we're going to help the
Well, that was the other thing too. Thank you, Kaiju Ninja. He mentioned it was raining out too when they arrived. Do you realize with all the ash that's on the ground?
Boy, it'd be pretty muddy, wouldn't it? Ashy.
That would be worse than mud, because ash is much more dense.
That's right.
Than mud.
Plus, it's acidic.
Right. And that's why people that lived around Yakima had to get up on their roofs to get the ash off the roofs, because an inch of ash is like 35 inches of snow. It's because it's so dense and heavy, and that ash, if that ash had built up, it would start collapsing roofs. So now you have this gunk on the ground, and it would be like a paste.
Yeah.
So one would think you would need, and it's raining out. No, nothing sounds right about that at all. How they got themselves into that position.
The superheated ash would be kind of like quicklime. It's acidic, and if you mix it with water and some gravel and sand, you could have your homemade concrete.
And then think about it. If it's raining with the ash content in the air, that's going to come down as very acidic and very pasty. So
it's kind of hard to believe that they would send the guy to a known area, a disaster area, and try to keep it secret from him. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Look, guys, we're going over to Mount St. Helens
everywhere.
To help out.
Poop.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
exactly.
Well, Chris, I think we put this to rest.
I think so. Yeah.
One heck of a good show tonight, and I want to thank everybody. So, Chris, do your thing. We'll get at it. We will be back Monday night, of course, 9 p.m.
We appreciate you guys for hanging out with us on Friday nights. Good Lord, the chat was hopping tonight. You guys were busy over there. But we sure appreciate you. It was good to see all the new names come in there. And if you haven't already, go ahead, subscribe to the channel, smash the like button on the way out if you hadn't already hit it. We appreciate everybody, and we're honored and thrilled to have you guys hang out with us on Wednesdays and Fridays, and sometimes Wednesdays, but Fridays and Sunday nights. It's just an honor, and we appreciate you guys, each and every one of you. If you hadn't subscribed, please do. And,
well, Chris and I'll let you guys know too out there that Chris and I, we're enjoying our Wednesday nights too now.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of fun. It's a way to connect. And even if we do like short shows on Wednesdays and Fridays, we do our longer show on Sundays.
Yeah.
This one ran over a little bit because I wanted to delve into this topic a little bit.
Well, yeah, there was some good audio clips. I enjoyed those.
Yep. Yeah, it's always fun looking at that stuff. Yeah. And, you know, and for those who are wondering if they've noticed a little bit of a shift in our programming, reason is we have 6,000 Bigfoot podcasts out there, and they're all doing interview stuff. Now, and I'll just make this a quick blanket statement, then we'll get out of here. But we were the first podcast out there to deal with Bigfoot. Got on Blog Talk in 2006, September 24th, 2006. So believe it or not, we are approaching our 18th year anniversary of doing this. 18 years of doing this, right? We're the longest running show out there. We started the 2-man post interviewing a researcher or a witness every week. Now that market has been overflown with every other podcast doing the same thing. So what we're doing now is a little something different. We're looking at evidence, we're looking at stories, and we're breaking them down, and we're talking about topics and education and stuff like that. And that's our new focus. And again, the truth is what we're about. And, you know, we'll still do the occasional interview. Especially, you know, we get a good academic in there or something that's really news. We'll still have some breaking news. We'll still do the breaking news. But we're really focusing on our live broadcast now, and we're focusing on educating people and looking at these stories and looking at them from a real aspect, not from a fantasy land. And that's why we love our audience, because our audience out there is one of the smartest audience out there. If you just subscribe to the channel, you're in good company, folks. You're going to enjoy this channel. We're going to have fun. We break it down, the real stuff. We don't want people out there with misinformation. That's really big to us. So, and again, I thank everybody. Love all of you guys for coming on this channel. And if you love this channel, we got a membership area. We're going to be doing some membership videos this week. We love you guys, and it helps the channel out, support honest research, and it's dirt cheap. And we're going to have more stuff about our storefront and stuff like that coming up in the future. But for now, so Chris, you want to just say goodbye one last time, and I'm going to get us out of here.
Thanks for hanging out with us. Good night, everybody.
So, and folks, we'll be back here Sunday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, right here with another great episode of Squatch-D TV Live. And who knows what we'll be looking at then. I got to rattle my coconut and see what's out there. But one thing we want to do is keep it fresh, keep it real, keep it new, and always evolving. Always evolving. That's important, that whatever we do. So, folks, again, on behalf of everybody here, have a great Saturday tomorrow. We will see you all in a couple of days. And everybody be good. We love you guys. God bless. Keep on squatching.
We thank you for being here with us on Squatch-D TV. If you haven't taken the time yet, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And oh yes, hit that notification bell too. We don't want you to miss anything. If you really like our content, you should consider becoming a member. And it's really inexpensive and a great way to support not only the show, but honest Bigfoot research. Everyone have a great week. Be safe and God bless. We will see you all here next time on Squatch-D TV. Keep on squatching.